I'm going to tell you my story related to mental health, and you can skip this section if you want to, if you just want to go straight into the guide. Although I do think there is going to be some kind of value if you sit through and just listen to my story, because you'll find that you'll be able to relate to me, and the more you can relate to me, the more that you'll kind of take my advice seriously. I didn't realize that mental health was a thing up until just a few years ago. But when I look back, especially at times in high school when I was 14, 15, 16 years old, I was definitely experiencing the symptoms then without realizing it. I was having quite negative thoughts. I was quite anxious, always like worrying about, if the teachers would call my parents and tell them that I was misbehaving. I struggled a lot being able to concentrate in school. So imagine you're in the classroom and the teacher, is at the front of the room and she's trying to teach you something. She's writing down on the board. She's talking to the class. And I would want to concentrate. I would want to get high grades in school. I just couldn't concentrate on what she was saying. She'd be talking to us and my mind would just be thinking about other things that were totally irrelevant to my studies. I was very consumed in video games, and this is a psychological term called escapism, which is kind of like escaping reality and instead going into this virtual reality where we can be and do whatever we want. Because in real life, I was a sad, anxious, lonely, abused little kid with not a lot of confidence, not a lot of friends, no attraction from girls. But in the virtual world, in the video games that I would play, I was a warrior, I was a chef, I was a knight, I was a magician. I got to try all of these different lives. And so it was so nice to be able to play a video game and really just obsess over them in my mind. I had other symptoms as well. I was binge eating. So imagine a 14-year-old and I just had this uncontrollable urge to just eat as much junk food as possible. Why was this happening? Why did I have poor mental health at this age? I was traumatized. And I was getting more and more trauma every single day. I was being abused at home, abused by my family. I was being abused in school. Honestly, school was traumatizing by itself when a teacher is unhappy with you and you can't concentrate, or maybe, I was talking in class and the teacher, like a grown adult, would get close to my face and scream and threaten me. Some of the teachers knew what was happening at home. I was getting abused. I was getting physically, emotionally hurt by my parents, by my brother. And some teachers knew what was happening and they would threaten me. They'd look me in the eyes with a certain look on her face and just say something like, "I'll call your father and we'll see what he'll do to you. We'll see what he has to say about that." When you're young, but honestly at any age, if you feel compulsively unsafe and you kind of have to stay in that situation, you can't, fortunately be able to leave your home or get out of a dangerous situation. When you're stuck there, you're stuck with your family, you're stuck in school, your body and your nervous system and your mind deteriorate very quickly. And suddenly you're put into this everlasting fight or flight feeling. And you can probably relate to this. If you can relate to the experiences that I've just spoke about, and you've experienced things like trauma and parental abuse, and you can probably relate to this feeling of your fight or flight system just always being activated. So there's two systems inside of our body. One is the fight or flight, and the other one is rest and digest. So the rest and digest is what should happen 99% of the time. Your heart rate should be low. Your entire body and all your organs and all that sciencey stuff is just working exactly how it's supposed to. And maybe 1% of the time, every now and then, in a moment of extreme stress and danger, we should kick into fight or flight and, really kick in. This is actually a good system to have. We shouldn't hate on the fight or flight system inside of us. It's just that sometimes, especially in the nature of child abuse, when you're stuck in that environment like I was when I was a child, and realistically, if I give you a very specific example, I don't want to create pictures in your mind that can trigger you or anything. So you should be warned that this entire video is going to be discussing mental health, abuse, trauma, everything, anxiety, fight or flight, everything, stress. So just be warned that you will feel yourself getting triggered in a trigger. I don't like that word because too many soft people have used it, but you will find your emotions, if you're really aware of them as you watch parts of this guide, will be spiked, and that's okay. Just be aware of it as I tell you the story, or you can skip forward. So a realistic example of something that's practically happened in my life, let me give you one example so you can know. In high school, we had these planners. That's what we would call them, planners, which is a booklet which has the days of the week, and you put in your homework there, and there's comments from teachers. So if you got a comment from a teacher, it was usually a bad thing. The teacher would say, "Okay, give me your planner," and she'd write a letter to your parents right there, and you had to show it to them and stuff. And so my dad would check my planner every couple of days, every week or so, to see what homework I had. And there's this one particular time where he asked me to see it, and he saw that there was a homework that had been set, and then he noticed that homework was due tomorrow, the day after we were reading it. And within an instant, he slapped me hard And he got angry and he's like, why have you left it for the last day? It was just a small, I forgot what it was, but it essentially like the teacher set it on that day. So she set it on that day and she said, oh yeah, just like quickly do it for tomorrow. And just like that, like I still remember it to this day. And I've made a lot of progress that I don't really feel activated as I tell you the story, which is a very, very good sign. I can't explain to you like how much, I will tell you more of my story, but I can't explain to you like I've put in a lot of work into this. But that was just one experience. And so that one experience of your caregiver suddenly attacking you, it jolts that fight or flight system inside of you. And suddenly as a little kid, like you feel defenseless. And I'm like a freezer. Every time I would get hit by my parents, I just kind of freeze there and just stop. Other kids, maybe they'd run away, other kids they'd like fight back or anything. I was always a freeze. And so when this would happen, I'd freeze. My dad's screaming in my face, being violent, being aggressive. Then my mum would come in and it's like, just chaotic in the family. Like, just one experience like that can be traumatizing. And so trauma is when, we'll go into this more often, but like, as I tell you these words, I don't particularly feel activated, but I can tell by the way that I'm talking, my mind keeps like going blank for a split second. I keep stopping my sentences. You can see that it still affects me. So just one instant, like the story I've just told you, that can be traumatizing of itself. Your caregiver attacking you and you being really scared. And so you can literally get a form of PTSD from just one instant like that. But if you've experienced childhood abuse, by your parents, and it's consistent and it's over the long term, hundreds of incidents like that, that's when this like mental health issue really starts to get a lot more serious. And so when I'm about 15, 16, 17 years old, this is when I first start to notice violence, aggressive thoughts in my mind. And I've never really been a violent person. There's only been a very few select times that I've physically hurt another man. I've never hurt a woman physically before. There's been a few times where I've like fully hurt a man. But I've had a lot of violent thoughts, and they started around age 15, 16, and it didn't feel abnormal. Sometimes you don't really question the kind of thoughts that you get because you're just so used to them. When I look back now and I don't really get these kind of thoughts anymore, there was a lot, and it was very worrying because maybe you're experiencing this, like you've got to understand. I feel like this part of the video is all over the place because I'm like recounting experiences. I don't know if there's going to be value in the words I'm saying right now, but I will sort of reframe myself soon, take a big deep breath after we're done with my story, and then hopefully I'll be able to instruct you for the rest of the course. Age 15, 16 onwards, a lot of violent thoughts in my mind, aggressive thoughts, and to be totally authentic, I'm going to walk you through one of the random thoughts I would get. Usually there would be when I was in the gym. My brother built like a home gym in our garage, very simple, like bench press, squat rack, whatever. So I'd be in there listening to like music and stuff, and my mind very, very frequently would imagine someone being hurtful towards me, maybe my family member, maybe a stranger, someone being racist, someone saying something, someone bullying me, someone like picking on me. It would imagine that, and I would get a sense of satisfaction and confidence when I would vividly see myself very vividly hurting them, and I would somewhat be acting this out in real life. One of them would be like, some guy's walking past me and for some reason he just calls me a packy. He's being racist. I start fighting him, we fall to the floor. I've gotten the strength advantage, like the upper hand. And then my mind generates these very vivid thoughts of me gouging his eyes out, crushing his face. And imagine having thoughts like this very frequently. At this point, from what I can remember, let's say I'm 16 years old, 17, 18 years old, it would happen 10 times a day. I'd be in school, I'd be in college or whatever, trying to focus on what the teacher's saying, and suddenly I'd just have one of these like emotional outbursts in my mind. Then things got a lot worse, and so that was already a pretty bad existence, but things got worse. I eventually left my family home and I moved to university. So I started having the time of my life. I've left my family, I can be like the kind of man I want to. I've started getting girls. I started like hooking up and going to parties and clubs and making new friends and being loud and drinking and taking drugs. And that spiraled very, very quickly. My biggest aim when I went to university was not to study or to be a good student or anything. It was literally just make friends and just sleep with women. And that's entirely what I focused on. And it's very fun making progress to your goals, especially as a young man. And you're kind of carefree, you're like an idiot, so you're like, oh yeah, I slept with 3 girls last week, it's so amazing. And the culture that this put me into, that I put myself into, this sort of drinking, drugs, partying, nightclub environment, it's very anxiety inducing. You go to like one of these clubs, let's say in the UK, and it's a bunch of students there. People don't really realize this about a club or a party, because a lot of people like kind of lie to themselves and say like, they go to the clubs or to parties just to have fun and dance with their friends and stuff. But a lot of people don't really see the evolutionary psychology that's going on here. It's a very, very primal environment. Because the underlying reason why men are going to this kind of environment at parties and clubs is because they want to hook up with the girls there. And the underlying reason why the girls there go and spend hours getting ready, makeup and stuff. And a lot of girls lie and say like, oh no, it's just for myself. I'm just, they say this shit. But the underlying subconscious reason why girls go there is because they want to get the attention of the guys who are there. And a bunch of girls also do want to hook up too. So it's a very, very primal environment. It's full with a bunch of like guys at the peak of their testosterone levels, drinking in groups of them, bunch of girls dressing in very like quite provocative ways, very sexualized environments, alcohol's flowing. And so it can be a very anxious environment. And I got like good in this environment. And something, if you've never really been to clubs or parties, something you'll maybe find out, or I can tell you, is that every couple of nights there is some kind of like incident, there is a fight, there is, some arguments, and it's not even that significant after a while. It just, you're used to it. We'd go out, me and my friends, and we'd always kind of know like, oh yeah, like, we'd probably end up hitting someone today. We'd probably end up like getting into like a tussle or arguments or shouting because this guy said this or this guy's bumped into him. And so whilst I was overindulging in this environment and I was getting good at it, I didn't realize how much anxiety it was really causing. That, that those same violent thoughts of like self-protection and, to hurt another man, they started compounding in my mind exponentially. The origin for those violent thoughts for me would have been my family, and it would have been, the sense of like injustice from being abused by my caregiver. But eventually it was very much compounded by this environment that I was getting into. And then things got even more traumatizing. I was the victim of a racist incident. So in Manchester, there was a bombing, like a terrorist attack in 2018. It was in the Ariana Grande Stadium. It was like a big musical concert and there was a terrorist attack there. And a few days after that, I finished work. I go to the train station to go home and there's just so much commotion, there's yelling. And what was happening was that there was two guys who were drunk who was screaming and being racist at a Muslim woman wearing like a hijab and her little girl that she had, like, holding her close. They're screaming in her face saying that you bombed us. Like, they're blaming her on the attack. They're just, they're crazy. These guys are crazy and everything. But I remember getting there, seeing this, and something just came inside of me for the first time. Like, this was before I could fight. This was before I was strong. I just started yelling at these guys, swearing at them. It enraged me. And I think what enraged me more was not so much just the racist guys, but the fact that there was lots of other people on the train station just kind of like buried into their phones, trying not to pay attention to what's going on, all the commotion, and even the staff who work there. But I get into like a verbal commotion with these guys, and it gets kind of scary. There's two grown-ass drunk men in front of me screaming at me, calling me like Packy and everything. I get onto my train eventually. I'm calming down a little bit, and just out of nowhere they walk past me and sit close to me. And for like a 20-minute train ride, they're just swearing, loud, racist, everything. Everyone's silent on the train, and we get off. Well, I get off first. I look back and they stand up, and they see me stand up, and they're like following me off the train. I text my dad, come like help, this racist. I literally still remember texting my dad this because he was waiting outside to pick me up, and I texted him this message saying, racist on the train, come inside quick. And he starts calling me, but I tell him I can't pick up. I don't know why I didn't just pick up and go on the phone call, but I tell him like, come inside. And I walk downstairs in the train station. He walks past me, he's like, wait, what's going on? Then they walk down, and then there's like a big like tussle and everything, big fighting. And this one guy, he just keeps doing some creepy shit. One of the drunk guys, he just keeps like smiling in a really weird way and saying like, okay, come here. Like he's kind of got one hand behind his back, and he's like, come here, just shake my hand. And he just does this so much. He does it to me, he does it to my father a bunch of times. He just keeps like trying to get close to us with his hand behind his back. He was later on arrested, and he had an 11-inch knife on him. This was all on the news. He was jailed for 1.5 years. It would have been a lot longer, but he didn't pull the knife out at any point, or he was trying to wait for like the perfect opportunity. The police officer told me this, like, if you actually pull a knife out, then it's way higher. But if you just have it like on your person, then it's only classed as like possession of a bladed article. So he got 1.5 years for this. And my anxiety, that same thing that I told you about, those violent thoughts, man, that they increased heavily. And so all those symptoms that I had before, like binge eating and violent thoughts, they compounded so much more. If I couldn't focus in school or university before this, now it was just totally, it felt impossible. And the only thing that I really spent my time doing at this point was just waking up, smoking weed, and just binge eating food, wanting to stay comfortable in my own little bubble, and not even realizing that this was a mental health issue. After this, I struggled heavily for around 1 to 2 years, and it's strange that I can kind of conclude those 2 years in just a single sentence. Like, yeah, I struggled heavily, but when I think back to those hundreds of days where I woke up feeling depressed and so anxious, where every single day I was seeing the physique that, meant so much to me. Like, fitness means a lot to me, and I was seeing my physique and my strength and my skill, my endurance all just go down every single day because I was choosing comfort over discipline. I was just somewhat like scared to leave the house. I never wanted to admit it, but I just, it felt so much more comfortable to think to myself, yeah, I'll stay in all day. I got into a relationship that was pretty toxic and not very loving, and that was my responsibility. That was my fault. I'll take full responsibility for that. And it's sad, man. I experienced somewhat of the height of my life at the start of university with like friends and partying and girls and everything. And my life just went straight down, all because of mental health. But what's interesting is that through all this, I didn't even know that mental health was the problem. It became more apparent to me after I finished university and I started looking for jobs. And I got into that young person's existential crisis, which you don't know what to do with your life. The jobs you're working aren't really that good. I started working a customer service job in a complaints department, which literally would make me cry. And this is when I started to look into entrepreneurship and online businesses, but I literally always struggled to actually being productive, especially by myself. In school, we have like a teacher, an authority figure. Maybe if you're a young man, you have like your parents who are looking at you and saying, okay, do this work right now. When you leave the education system, you're not really prepared for that. So you become your own boss, and that became extra stressful because I just wasn't doing any work that I would set by myself. I would say to myself, okay, I want to make this website, I want to do like this business task today. What do you think I did? I'd wake up and I'd just start smoking weed, and then I didn't do the work. And it was at this time, age 21, where I luckily just stumbled upon people talking about improving their mental health on Reddit. There's like an online discussion of like mental health resources. It was the start of the COVID lockdown. This period of my life changed everything. I started researching mental health, learning things about depression, anxiety, gratitude, mindfulness, all the practical, no BS things that we can implement for free that will improve our mental health. And that's what you're going to learn in this guide. I've said many times that there are no overnight successes. I've said many times there's no shortcut to success. You have to work hard for a long time. You have to be consistent. You have to be disciplined. But if there is one shortcut to success, it's improving your mental health. I discovered mental health and I started to actively improve it. And I promise you that this is the case. Within 2 weeks, my life changed forever. Within 2 weeks, I left that relationship that was kind of toxic. I've not really gave many details about it because I spoke about it extensively in previous videos. Plus, I just don't want to really speak about it too much. But I left that relationship. I was living with her. So we lived together in an apartment. I moved out, finally moved out. I quit smoking weed. I quit eating junk food. I moved back home to my parents' house in the middle of COVID. And I literally got into the best shape of my life so far. I got ultra lean. My diet was fantastic. I started meditating for 20 minutes, then 40 minutes, then 60 minutes a day. I was journaling. I was working on businesses. I had the quickest turnaround of my entire life. And that really just snowballed into the success that I have today, which I feel is massive. I want the same thing for you. So in this guide, we're going to focus on the two most common mental illnesses, which are depression and anxiety. When you took that online mood assessment that I linked at the top of the description, you would have gotten a depression and anxiety score. The goal of this guide is to halve those scores within just 2 weeks. So if you took that test and you scored 14 for depression and 16 for anxiety in just 2 weeks of following this guide, we want to get you to 7 on depression and 8 on anxiety, a massive improvement.